Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I was approached with this video request in my Discord community. Hi, long-time listener, first-time Discorder. Really enjoyed the level 20 video. First time I've seen a one-shot at level 20 that worked in that it challenged the players, but was also fun. I have a follow-up video request. A video where you talk about your general thoughts on level 20 power and things that come up in the game like straight class versus multi-class, silvery barbs in action, combining puzzles and combat, and anything else you reflect upon after a great level 20 session. So thanks so much for that, and I think I can cover this question fairly quickly, but this gave me another idea for this video. I've become pretty confident that I can run high-level D&D without it falling apart, and I'd like to share some of the things that I try to do that seem to work for me in running high-level games. But as for the question, straight class versus multi-classing, I think the optimization community, we recognize that some multi-classing can be really powerful. Not that a straight class character is necessarily weak, but adding on that hex dip or those couple levels of fighter or several other multi-classing techniques can give a build a boost. The thing about 20th level though, particularly with a one-shot, is straight class builds just become a lot more tempting. Not necessarily because they're better than multi-classing, but because class capstones are something we just normally don't see in play, and we like trying new things. This one-shot was the first time Eric had ever used a Paladin capstone, and it was the first time I saw the Ancient's Paladin capstone used. I mean, that's just fun. Now, as for silvery barbs, listen, if it's not to your taste, by all means don't use it. I've been playing with it since publication, and it is a good first-level spell, but I haven't considered it a real problem, at least up to now. Then again, on that 50K video, I did have some comments where viewers considered it confirmation that it shouldn't be allowed. I personally didn't have that feeling, but if different players and DMs have different tastes, I'm not going to tell you what to do to have fun. Do what's right for you. As for combining puzzles and combat, I think I'll go over that a bit in a bigger portion of this video, which is going to be how I approach high-level play as a DM. Hi, if you like the content you're seeing and you would like to support it, you can find a link to my Patreon page in the video description. Today I'd like to thank some of my top-level patrons: Douglas Reynolds, Drew Terry, Eric Wasserman, FBK05, Gishlife, Gakamaru, Hendry, Hoerby, Ian Johnson, Jay Gemmel, Jack Harper, James Makla, James Sprague, James Thomas, Jeff Williams, Jad Zan, John Matera, Jonathan Lexi, Joseph Robideau, Joseph Van Horn, Josh Davis, Justin Times, KJ Aurelio, Kurt G, Lee LeMay, and LaFurja. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. So, you have a DM, and they're considering their upcoming campaign. The players have mentioned that they want to get their characters to level 20. However, the DM is hoping to run this campaign right to the conclusion, and they've heard many times that the game breaks down far before 20th level. And they're wondering, what level is it where the game becomes unplayable? Why did they even include all this high-level stuff in the books? All these tasty features and spells? Why is that stuff in the rule books if you aren't supposed to ever use it? So what can this DM do? The highest challenge rating creatures in publication are CR 30. And go online and you can see posts and articles on how these creatures can be easily defeated at much lower levels than level 20. So how can the party even be challenged at level 20? And the party flying and shooting bows at a Tarrasque for countless rounds where it can do nothing until it dies just sounds really boring anyways. How many sessions of that do we want before we decide the players have just won D&D and let's scrap this campaign, realize we made a big mistake by going to such high levels, and then starting over? Well, first, I will say this, and most of this stuff is my opinion, but this is a fact. You can play high-level D&D. You can cast 9th level spells. You can access class capstones. You can have a party of superheroes, and you can still keep them challenged. And yes, even keep the weapon users feeling useful. And I don't have any special secret here. Players are doing it right now. I've played and run 5th edition at high levels quite a few times without having anything fall apart. But not that it couldn't fall apart. It probably has for some players and for DMs. And I can think of some things that I find myself doing with high-level play that I think help keep it working. So I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a long time. Started with the basic set, moved on to advanced, played all other kinds of role-playing games, as well as 2nd edition, 3rd, 3.5, bit of 4th, Pathfinder, and now I play 5th edition almost all the time. Problems with high-level play didn't start with this edition. They've always been there. Spells can become game-breaking at high levels. Play can bog down as players have near endless things to do on their turn from nearly endless options. I remember specifically a game I ran for D&D that did fall apart. This was not 5th edition, it was 3rd edition. The characters got to very high level, and I remember spending an entire weekend designing exploration through a Formian colony. Formians were these super lawful neutral creatures from the outer planes that were these ant-like monsters. You could apply templates to creatures in 3rd edition to make them tougher, so I remember I took this whole weekend creating this adventure, hours and hours applying various templates to various Formians to give them distinct features. Honestly, it was kind of grueling. I remember at the end of the weekend just being exhausted with the amount of work getting these stat blocks ready. However, I was convinced that I had created encounters that would really challenge the PCs. But they were still winnable, I thought. So that next Friday, we got together at 7 p.m. and started to play. The characters had a hook to get to the Formian Queen. I don't remember what it was, but they traveled to the outer planes, found the colony, and they entered. Very soon, they found themselves in a combat with these enhanced Formians. We rolled initiative. Maybe it was 8 p.m. at this point. Then at 2 a.m., we were all tired, and we decided to stop. The first battle wasn't only not complete, but it wasn't even close to complete. Every turn, both the turns of the players and the Formians, was taking forever, and the party and their foes had so many ways to recover from damage or spells or effects that it became a bookkeeping exercise of slowly draining resource pools. So we stopped. It was the first time we had ever played D&D where we couldn't complete a single combat in a session. The monotonous pace of the battle also had none of us excited to pick back up again on the following week. It had been the first time in a long time where the players had felt challenged. And when we look back at the competing resource pools of the PCs and the Formians, we did conclude that had we continued playing, eventually the PCs were going to win the fight. But none of us had any interest in doing that. We agreed to just end the campaign right there. The game had fallen apart due to the level. Now, 5th edition has introduced some mechanics that prevent some of this slog. The concentration mechanic for spells is probably the biggest, preventing the endless layering of spell after spell after spell. Attunement slots are another, reducing the number of game-changing magic items a single character can bring to bear. For most classes, extra attack ends at 2 attacks, leaving the 4 attacks, then action surge, then 4 more attacks, then bonus action attacks and reaction attacks and such to fighters alone. High-level casters have fewer spell slots than they used to, especially for higher-level spells, never surpassing 2 slots for spell levels of 6 and higher. Yeah, this stuff is all things 5th edition introduced to help make turns go faster at higher levels and for the super big stuff to not overwhelm your game. But that doesn't mean you can just play up to 20th level without any of the problems I encountered in earlier editions. If you want to find warnings to not even try higher level play, you don't have to look far. I just searched a couple keywords on my own Discord server and found these warnings. And Tier 3 and Tier 4 are mentioned a few times. If you're unaware of what these terms mean, Tier 3 means character levels 11 through 16, and Tier 4 is character levels 17 and higher. It really feels like the game falls apart at upper levels in a lot of ways, which I suppose is generally true of RPGs. It's hard to keep rewarding players in satisfying ways without eventually breaking things. But here's the thing, 5e sucks. Well, you can read the rest. When it comes to Tier 3 and Tier 4, you might as well kill your marshal and play a caster at that point because it's going to show that your tools become irrelevant. Everything falls apart at 18th level, Tier 4. Tier 3 and Tier 4 are non-functional in 5e. Tier 4 is more about preventing the wizard from breaking the game than anything else. I'll stop there. You get the idea. So hopefully, most of you have watched my 50k celebration where I ran a 20th level one-shot for the Dungeon Dudes, Fry Minis, and D4 Deep Dive. I'll post a link for you if you haven't. But the gist of it is, in 4 hours, we completed the one-shot that included several combat encounters. The characters were challenged, but ultimately victorious. The characters got to do their ultra-powerful high-level stuff. We had 30-foot paladin auras, a paladin capstone, prismatic wall, a shape change spell, a staff of power, a holy avenger sword, spell save DCs of 23, and every player had a chance to feel powerful, and we had a good time. And we played live on the Dungeon Dudes Twitch channel, so good thing it wasn't a disaster. But I did some things that made me pretty confident it was going to turn out fine. When looking for examples of warnings against high-level play, I did happen upon this post as well. High-level D&D requires the same social contract as low-level D&D. If you have people that ignore that, the game will break down. Now, this post might actually downplay the very real challenges of running a high-level game, but I think it hits the most important factor dead on. Well done, 65. If you want to play at high levels, I think this is the single most important factor, the social contract. So yes, we can break the game at level 20. Here's an extreme example. I have a high-level wizard. Let's say I'm a 20th level wizard. I start the day with all my spell slots. I've made sure to prepare the Simulacrum spell and the Wish spell. So I use my 7th level slot, and I take the 12-hour casting time, and I pay the costed component one time, and I cast Simulacrum on myself. Now I have a copy of myself that has all my spells and my slots minus the one 7th level slot. Now that Simulacrum casts Wish. By casting Wish, they can create the effects of a spell 8th level or lower with one action casting and no costly components. So they use it to create the effect of the Simulacrum spell with my character as the target. They no longer have their 9th level slot, but they're targeting me, and I do have my 9th level slot. So they have another Simulacrum of me with their 9th level slot intact. That Simulacrum does the same thing, again targeting me with a wished Simulacrum spell. Then on the following round, the next one does, and then the next one. One action for each simulacrum, so 10 simulacrums each minute, 600 each hour. Within a few hours, I have an army of simulacrums that number in the thousands. They all last forever, and although they don't recover spell slots, I don't know, let's say I'm a diviner, so I have 3 uses of Portent every day. Now I have many thousands of uses of Portent every day. So anytime a die is rolled in the game for an ability check, saving throw, or attack roll, somewhere, someone in my army of simulacrums can change that die result to whatever I want it to be. The enemies start rolling only 1s. The party only ever rolls 20s. Then they all cast Magic Missile in combat because of spell mastery. None of them are going to lose a spell slot. So near infinite force damage to an enemy. No saving throw, no to hit rolls, every round. An enemy that has the shield spell? Okay. One simulacrum will cast Counterspell. I can replace that with thousands more 3rd level slots, with thousands more simulacrums the next day. My simulacrums cover the globe, the outer planes. I conquer the greatest empires. Eventually, I replace the gods as the ultimate being in the universe. This is an extreme example of how I can wreck a game at high level. So how do I keep this stuff from happening? Do I need to create a house rule that you can't wish for simulacrum? I mean, it could, but if I want to try to block every way a game can be broken by an exploit or a loop, I'm going to end up constantly plugging the holes with an ever-expanding list of house rules that all break down to don't break the game this way and don't break the game that way. And you know what? My game could end up breaking anyways. It's like trying to stop a leak that keeps expanding because there's so many ways the game could be broken. So instead, I create a social contract with my players. We can do this before the campaign, or we could just have an ongoing agreement. We like playing in this campaign. Don't intentionally do something that's going to wreck everyone's good time. I actually had a case where the Simulacrum option became available to player characters for one-shots I was running for patrons of this channel. And I actually just asked the players to vote. Do they want this to be part of the game? And the overwhelming vote was no, we don't want it. If someone at your table isn't on board with that agreement, you might not need to get to high levels before you're going to have a problem. But I find the social contract isn't enough on its own. There are in fact additional challenges to running high-level games. Let's go over a list of things we can do as a DM to make high-level play work. So number 1 is a social contract, as we already discussed. Number 2, manage the rules. Number 3, manage magic items. Number 4, watch what the characters do. Number 5, create interesting environments. Number 6, create unique challenges. Number 7, create interesting monsters. Number 8, give everyone a chance to shine. And number 9, make reasonable rulings. Let's go over them one at a time. So number 1, the social contract. I basically went over this already. I try to let the players know the game I'm trying to run, and I ask them to work with me to help me do it. If you try to break my game, then you might succeed, and then you've wrecked it for everyone, including yourself. So don't. Let's go over the rest of the list. Number 2, manage the rules. So here's something that is going to seem obvious to some of you, but might seem surprising to others. The Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. These are the core rules of D&D. Everything else is optional. I recently saw a post suggesting that because I don't allow winged tieflings, a tiefling variant in the setting book, the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, that this was some kind of house rule. As far as I'm concerned, any player option not in the core 3 books should be assumed to need my approval before taking it. By the way, anything that is specifically titled as not an option for PCs, like rules on custom monster creation or NPC subclasses, shouldn't be assumed to be available either. As a DM, I will let the players know what non-core player options are available to them, and then they can choose from those options. This makes sure I know what players had for their characters, so don't get surprised with some obscure summon option from some adventure path I've never read before. Number 3, manage magic items. This one's really important. High-level play has an increased danger that the game starts being about the magic items instead of the characters. Character features can become overshadowed by plentiful and powerful magic items. To prevent this, I use a few techniques. First, I always make sure I control what magic items player characters receive. There's a magical item called the Ring of Spell Storing. I personally see some problems with it, and so in my campaigns, there won't be any Rings of Spell Storing. They'll get some nifty magic items, just not that magic item. Letting player characters buy whatever they want or craft whatever they want, as long as it's published somewhere, can cause unintended problems. So I find a better way is simply for me to award magic items. That way, I have control over what they are. All the crafting stuff is in your control as well. Let's start out with, it's all optional. So it's up to you whether to have crafting at all. But if you have it, at least consider how much downtime characters are going to have to craft and what and how many items they can craft. If it gets out of hand, you'll find it can create consequences you maybe hadn't considered after it's too late. Also, anything that isn't a spell scroll requires a formula, and you decide what formulas the characters can get access to. Second, I never award a magic item unless I know what it does. Read the magic item before you give it out. Consider the features. We shouldn't be surprised that a magic item we awarded does something that's a problem. If we don't know how a feature will affect the game, we should pause. Black Razor provides a number of temporary hit points to the wielder equal to the maximum hit points of the creature it slays. So if that party is regularly fighting creatures with hundreds and hundreds of hit points, that's hundreds and hundreds of temporary hit points. Are you okay with that? Is it going to lead to that party member overshadowing the other player characters? I mean, it sounds cool, but let's actually think about how it's going to affect our game before we award it. And you can create your own magic items. Maybe we'll make something kind of like Black Razor, but maybe the temporary hit points it awards are more manageable. Nothing says the magic items you award need to be published. Third, attunement slots are a tool we can use to keep the number of magic items the characters can use in hand. It's not something that we need to work around. If something is powerful and it has unique and powerful features, then I would make sure it has attunement. I recently concluded a campaign that went to 17th level where the characters had a massive collection of magic items and they all required attunement. So each character picked 3 of those items that worked well for their character, and as we played, they would swap less powerful items for more powerful ones as the campaign progressed, instead of constantly just piling more items onto their character. Attunement was a great way to allow me to continually reward player characters with more powerful items without anyone getting bogged down with a plethora of magic items that are available for use at any time. Number 4, watch what the characters do. Did the characters just walk over that encounter that I thought would challenge them? This happens. A player whips out a spell or a feature that I didn't consider when making the encounter, and suddenly the challenge of that encounter is gone. I don't consider this a bad thing. As a player, I figure it's nice to figure out an elegant solution to a challenge. It feels rewarding when it happens. But I don't want every encounter to be a cakewalk. And as a DM, I don't necessarily study and memorize the characters, but when they do walk over an encounter, I take note. How did they do it? Then when I make the next encounter I want to be challenging, I can remember that and make sure it can't be handled the exact same way. Number 5, create interesting environments. So, I use wide open plains sometimes, and sometimes there's a door and inside there's some monsters and roll initiative. But if I want to challenge players that have just fallen into a rut of standard tactics that they constantly use, I find changing up environments can break that rut. Maybe on that wide open plain there's also a thick fog. Maybe that room has places where monsters can get cover. Maybe there's water or pools of lava. Any of these things and countless others can change things up, and now the players need to adjust their tactics to figure out how to take care of this specific challenge. This is fun for me as the DM, and it's fun for the players, and it can shut down a lot of that high-level stuff that is becoming the best tactic that players are using over and over again. Number 6, create unique challenges. So in my recent 50k celebration, I ran one shot for 20th level characters, and I want to give a shout out to Proudhammer, who helped me with some of the encounter ideas, but basically I attempted to create puzzle elements for the encounters. So it wasn't just see this enemy, defeat this enemy, but there was something the players needed to figure out in order to be victorious. This made each encounter play out differently than the one before it. This makes players figure out different ways to use their characters in order to beat the challenge. And it works really well with high-level play because a puzzle might have multiple solutions, and then the players need to coordinate and look at aspects of their characters they might not normally access to figure it out. Not that you need a puzzle element for encounters, but by creating an encounter that isn't just here's some monsters and now start attacking, I just find it keeps players challenged and having fun. Number 7, use interesting monsters. So you have a low CR monster. Then you add some hit points, maybe legendary resistances, and yeah, the monster is more challenging, but it's not more interesting. I like to look for monsters that do something cool. Monty from Dungeon Dudes ran a one-shot where we faced an Elder Brain Dragon. This is a tough creature, but check out these cool features. Its breath infests targets with Mind Flayer tadpoles. Its tentacle attack grapples and restrains. Its legendary actions include an option to break concentration on a creature it's grappling. These kinds of unique features makes this an interesting creature to fight. I look for these kind of creatures that have features I normally don't see, because my players normally haven't seen them either. And I'll often change features on a creature. Maybe the Elder Brain Dragon can teleport. Maybe it will have some spells. Maybe it can change forms. Maybe when it dies, the Elder Brain is freed, and now you have to face that. I'm the DM. I can change creatures however I like if I think it'll make them more interesting for the party to fight. And this links back to watching what my players do. Can they just shut down this thing the same way they shut everything down? Well, maybe this creature has a way around that. I can just add it in. Number 8, give everyone a chance to shine. So it's no secret that spellcasting is really powerful at high levels, and probably more powerful than high-level class and subclass features. But the wizards and druids don't have to dominate every fight. When we watch what our players do, we can tailor our encounters to account for that. Maybe this monster is immune to spells of 6th level or lower, like a Rakshasa, but it doesn't have legendary resistances or a particularly high constitution saving throw. So now suddenly, the monk is the star, using stunning strikes while the spellcasters are just scratching their heads, figuring out why their spells aren't just winning everything. Maybe I tailor magic items that are going to specifically enhance a character that is falling behind. In that recent one-shot, I had a unique magic item that helped solve an encounter in each encounter, and that magic item could be used by a single character, and each character got such a magic item once. So at least in one fight, each player had that opportunity to be the main character. I like to do stuff like that sometimes. It just makes sure nobody is getting left out. And the last one, Make reasonable rulings. So a DM has to make rulings constantly in D&D. The rules aren't, and really can't be, crystal clear when characters aren't given a limited number of things that they can try or do. The rules generally tell players what they can do, and then it's up to the DM to tell them when they can't do something. This seems to come up more when we get into this super high level stuff, but it comes up at low levels too. Like the character who's up in the air shooting down at that Tarrasque. Just because I don't make you track ammo, does that mean you have unlimited ammo? Or is it reasonable for me to say, how many arrows could your character reasonably have? You're going to run out. I think that's a reasonable ruling. I find the best way for me to handle this is I try to make rulings that make sense to me and prevent things from getting out of hand. Let me give another example. So we'll go back to the Tarrasque. It's gargantuan. That means it's represented by a token on a grid that covers 16 squares. So can a character trap it in a force cage? The force cage spell says we can create a prison that can be up to 20 feet on a side, so that will fit around the Tarrasque marker. However, the description of the Tarrasque says it's a 50-foot tall and 70-foot long creature. That's way too big to fit in a force cage. So maybe those 16 squares are just the areas the Tarrasque controls, and lots of empty squares around it still have parts of the Tarrasque in them. Or maybe it's all curled up and ducking, so it only takes up those 16 squares. If this comes up, as a DM, I have to make a ruling here. I'm not just going to consider what's cool right now, but also how is it going to affect my game going forward? Do I want it to be so every monster in the game fits in a force cage? Maybe. Or maybe just this once. I'll say, you catch a moment where the Tarrasque is balled up in a 20-foot cube, but don't expect this to work next time. Sometimes when I make a ruling, I'll say I'm not sure how to rule something, so this is the way we're going to work it right now, but that doesn't mean I'll rule the same way in the future. Being careful and trying my best to make reasonable rulings does help prevent the list of, you can do this thing, from being a real problem later on. So those are 9 things I try to keep high-level play working in 5th edition D&D, and they seem to work for me. I'm sure other DMs have different methods to make high-level play work, but if you don't, you might try these. Like I said, they've worked well for me. If you have some different methods that you use, let me know in the comment section down below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.